What's going on, everybody? Liam O'Reilly, Vermont Economic Realtor. Hope you're doing well. I'm here with Gary Winslett, who wrote the article that I made a video about a few weeks ago about Vermont's housing crisis and how it's got so bad. Talking about really getting to the root of a lot of the causes with the housing crisis that we're experiencing. So, Gary is in the market himself, looking for a home, has been looking for quite some time. So I wanted to follow up with Gary as an expert. He's a professor at Middlebury College. So he really knows a lot about the economics in general, the housing market, especially here in Vermont. So I wanted to get his opinion on a few things and share that with you folks. So Gary, the first thing that I wanted to ask you was, you've been in the market for a while. You've been looking for a home for a long time.
Yeah.
How have these higher rates affected your housing search here?
I mean, they really squeeze down the purchase price of what we can afford, right? If we could think about 425 at, 2.5, 3% interest, now it's really like, we really can't go above four. Like 375 is probably a better price point for us. But then there's no good housing at 375
Right.
in the area.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't exist. And so what's your experience been when you've seen a house that you like and you wanted to submit an offer?
Oh, I mean, the first couple of times it was just like super disappointing because you would think you would have a shot at it.
Hmm.
And then, you would go to the open house and there would be 15 cars at the open house. And there would be, dozens of people viewing the house. And there would be 10 offers.
Right.
And so your offer that was at the price point, but the house would be 100 years old, so you'd want it inspected,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
Because it's 100 years old, and somebody else is bidding $40,000 over the asking price and waiving the inspection, and they've never even seen the house.
Right.
And it's very frustrating because you feel like you can't, and it's all cash sometimes, and
Right.
so you just feel like you can't compete with that, and
Yeah.
it's very frustrating. And then I look around at other people who make less than what my wife and I do, and I feel even worse for them because
Yeah.
I'm a professor, she's a physician assistant.
Wow.
If we can't buy a house here, what are like genuinely working class people doing? And it's like they have no options,
Right.
and so you really feel for those people. When I lived in a mobile home until I was 11.
Hmm.
But we lived in a place where housing was abundant, and so my parents were able to buy a house for about 145. So today that would be about like 250,
All
and
right.
so we were able to like move out of the mobile home.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, if we had lived in a mobile home here, I don't know that we would have gotten out of that.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so I think about people in that kind of situation. Like if I go over to like the Walmart in Williston
Hmm.
or like Costco,
Right.
um, there's a lot of like working class people who like go shop at the Walmart in Williston,
Right.
and so I feel for them in this housing market because if we're struggling,
Yeah.
they're just completely up a creek.
It is really tough, especially under 300,000. I mean, the market is ridiculously competitive there, and
Yeah.
it's tough to bring more supply to the market. And um, one of the things that you mentioned in your article here was talking about a lot of the homes that we're building right now, a lot of the new construction being brought to the
Hmm.
market is in that $600,000 plus
Yep.
price range, which you mentioned, I mean, in this conversation and in the article, that's out of what you guys are looking for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it makes more housing for everybody and
Yeah.
adds more supply to the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you add a $600,000 house to the market, that's not something we can afford, but maybe that's something who somebody who currently has a $500,000 house moves up into that,
Right.
and now that house is open. And so then somebody who's currently in a $400,000 house moves up to that. Well,
Hmm.
now the 400 house is something we can afford.
Right.
And so the place we're currently renting, well, now that's open to somebody who makes a little less than we do.
Yeah.
That's how filtering sort of works
Yeah.
in the market.
Right. Right. Well, what would you say? I mean, with these higher interest rates, there's a lot of people that have locked in at a 3% rate or maybe even
Hmm.
lower, a 4% rate, and
Hmm.
now a lot of the people that would be moving up into that $600,000 home and
Hmm.
creating that trickle up effect
Hmm.
are are stuck.
Right,
And
because they don't want to drop a 2.75% mortgage to take on
yeah,
a 5.75 or 6
at
mortgage
a much
at
higher
a much
loan
higher.
amount.
Right, right.
Um,
So this is actually a really great question. So filtering helps, but it's not the only thing that you can do. One of the reasons that developers here, build at that price point is because that's what they can make a profit on.
right.
The regulations that we have in place in the area really constrain developers' ability to build at scale.
Hmm.
Um, the way you economize on things is to build at scale. There's a reason why you get a good deal at Costco,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's at scale. If you say, no, 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 as soon as 10 houses, as soon as it's going to be 10 units, you got all these new rules kick in. It
Yeah.
really constrains developers' ability to build at any kind of scale. And so now it's hard to make a profit. Like the reason developers don't build in this area at that 350, 375 price point
Hmm.
is because it simply does not pencil.
Right.
Once you add in all the regulatory cost, once you add in the land cost,
Hmm.
once you add in having to do all of these different sort of compliance costs, it
Yeah. It
doesn't make
doesn't make
profit.
sense.
And
Yep.
so like a developer is not going to like take a $50,000 loss on a house.
Yeah.
And so all these regulations mean that the only thing that's profitable to build is $600,000 and $700,000.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Which is tough. Which is tough. Do you think that? So it's. Do you think that with trying to think about how to phrase this? So the $600,000 property is mainly what's being built right now. Do you think that is obviously it's not the only solution, but do you think it is effective for with because it's so tough for move up buyers
mhm,
to people who would
yeah,
want
yeah,
to move into that and open up the kind of middle housing and have
mhm,
that trickle up with these higher rates?
yeah.
Do you think with today's interest rate environment that's an effective way to help people who can't afford
I think so. I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
houses are to some degree substitutable at price of those around them,
Hmm.
right? To some degree, a $600,000 place is substitutable for a 575,
Right.
right? And a 575 is in some sense substitutable for a 550. And
Sure.
so the
Sure.
housing market kind of does work in this sort of single globular way to a
Hmm.
certain degree. And so anything you're doing to expand supply
Right.
actually does help bring prices down or keeps them from going up even higher.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I'm sure there's people watching this video or who will watch this video that are, you know, seeing a lot of people coming in from out of state,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of people coming in from out of state
We came in
purchasing
from
homes
out of
here.
state,
Yeah, right. Right,
right?
exactly.
Like I don't want to be too sharp about this, but it's like, well, having people come in from out of state is not like the worst thing.
Right.
Uh, I mean, we came in from out of state. I don't think we're bad people.
Yeah. No,
I
you're
take my
not.
kid to
No,
the
of course
park
not.
and
Yeah.
we take our kid to soccer practice.
Yeah.
We're normal people. We pay our taxes. We go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
I think some of the oh my god, people are moving in from out of state. It's like I don't know. That just it it surprises me that there is sometimes a negative reaction to that.
Yeah.
When I just that it strikes me as somewhat unwelcoming. I think
Right.
when I don't think it has to be that way.
No.
And
It
again,
it shouldn't be.
who am I to be like, oh, those out of staters shouldn't come here? Like
Right.
we came here
Yeah.
like in like 2019, like what
Yeah.
And I actually think most Vermonters, or maybe not most, I'm not sure the percentage, so I don't want to just like make something up,
Hmm.
but like a pretty sizable chunk of Vermonters did not grow up in Vermont.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah,
Right.
and so it's just it is continually very strange to me when I hear people who like grew up in Massachusetts or
Yeah.
New Jersey or New York.
Right.
Now they live in Vermont and they're like out of staters. I'm like,
I know.
you,
You used to be an out of stater,
yeah,
right? Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's from reading your article and I don't know our conversations that we've had. It seems like the goal is really to have enough housing for everybody. And
yeah,
you mentioned in your article
yeah,
about how UVM is I think the worst school in the country for graduates moving out of state or
yeah.
one of the
So the
worst.
state of Vermont loses more
Oh,
college graduates than any other state.
right.
Um, like that's not good. Like we know that we have demographic challenges in this state.
Yeah.
Um, it's an aging state, and we have a sort of very stagnant population. We need to grow. We need young people to stay. We
Hmm.
need young families to stay, and they can't
Yeah.
if it's just too expensive.
Right. Right.
I mean, and most of the people that I've talked to that are in the process of leaving the state or considering it or want to leave, and I've talked to a number of them, not a single one of them has been like, I hate Vermont.
Yeah.
None of them say that.
Right.
They're all just like, it's too expensive. I can't afford it here.
Right. It is.
That's not good.
Yeah. No, it's not good, and that's something that I've been hearing more and more with the community of people that I'm friends with is they say like, you know, Boston prices with a Burlington income
Income. Yeah.
for most of for most
Yeah.
of these people. Yeah, which is
That's
tough.
crazy too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a real problem.
Yeah. And so, kind of off the cuff a little bit, I know a lot of towns have been banning Airbnbs as part of trying to
I
help this issue.
I think that's so. There's a lot of problems with that. First of all, tourism is Vermont's number one industry.
Yeah.
We actually need people to come here and visit the state, whether it's for leaf peeping or skiing or
Right.
having a nice summer weekend or whatever. Like that's how we make money.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to build hotels, and there's, we put all kinds of barriers to that,
Hmm.
and we're also going to tell people they can't do Airbnb, we're really sort of shooting ourselves in the foot on our number one industry, which is tourism, if we're going to basically make it astronomically expensive to come for the weekend.
Right.
That's not a good strategy. I also think it's in some ways scapegoating a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, it's trying to solve the housing crisis without increasing housing supply,
Yeah.
which is like you're not going to do that.
Which is tough. I mean, when demand's going up in
Right,
all
right.
aspects.
You need a supply increase, like a real
Right.
supply increase, not just to scapegoat Airbnb or second homes or whatever.
Right.
The other thing too is like a lot of uh, the epicenter of our housing problem is Chittenden County,
Hmm.
and if you actually look at the numbers, there aren't that many second homes in Chittenden County.
Yeah.
Like the places where there are second homes are like further downstate.
Hmm.
Um,
Ski area
ski area
towns.
towns, right, right. That's not here. Like second homes is not. It's not the problem
Yeah.
in this area.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes people are missing the mark a little bit analytically when they think
Hmm.
it's an Airbnb or second homes generated problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like an easier, almost like a band-aid
Yeah.
over a.
Well, and it sounds easy too, right?
Yeah.
If you talk yourself into thinking that, well, we just need to like put the screws to the Airbnb owners, that'll fix it.
Yeah.
Like if that's what you convince yourself is true, then it sounds like there's an easy solution.
Yeah. Well, and you can understand how somebody could think that way because they could think, back in 2010, this housing problem wasn't as bad, and now there's Airbnbs that I see
Mhm.
all over the place,
Yeah.
and so you know what? Let's get rid of those, and we'll get back to 2010,
Right.
which
That's not correct. I mean,
yeah, and I
yeah.
think a big portion of that too has to do with the rise of the internet and kind of the
Mhm.
sparked by COVID. People
Sure,
can
sure.
live anywhere.
And yeah, I mean, people have properties.
Hmm.
They want to, oftentimes they're not cash rich, but they do have a property,
Yeah.
right? So, like, there's people down in Middlebury where I teach at where, they like to have it as an Airbnb because then around graduating weekend, around parents' weekend, they can make some like really good money renting out their house for 3 or 4 days
Yeah.
to somebody coming in. And like to somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of income, but
Mm.
they do have that property, like, okay, I can see that. Like, I'm not mad at you for like turning your property into a cash flow for yourself.
Right.
Um, this is one of these things where I think if we do housing right, lots and lots of people win,
Hmm.
and almost nobody loses.
Hmm.
But we've just got to loosen up some of the regulations. Like some of the regulations are just too stringent. They
Hmm.
get too much in the way of supply, too much in the way of building, too much in the way of development. And in
Yeah.
some places you need development.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So what would you say? There's a lot of people that argue that building more development, building more houses it's, we're taking away from the nature, and we're harming the environment by bringing these developments into
So
existence.
I don't think that you should try to limit literally all development everywhere.
Mm.
I think some of that is a very sort of 1970s kind of environmentalism, where it was about no, don't build this, no, don't build that, no, don't do that. And at one point that may have made sense, right? We didn't have an EPA at one point. We didn't have a Clean Air Act. We didn't have a Clean Water Act.
Yep.
That's not the kind of environmentalism we need to be thinking through today. Like
Mm.
the more effective environmentalism to really fight climate change is to help people live near where they work,
Yeah.
right? And to be in modern housing that has modern insulation. If somebody's forced to commute into South Burlington from Swanton or St. Albans or Barry,
Yeah.
and also they're forced to live out in a 120-year-old house out there,
Yeah.
that's a lot of emissions that they're putting on the road.
Hmm.
That's a lot of money they're using in terms of their own resources, but also like it's hard to heat a 120-year-old house.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fuel oils they're going through,
Yeah.
right? And so I think the modern environmentalism really needs to be about building things,
Mm.
right? Rather than just being like, no, no, no to everything.
Right.
And the other thing too is like if you're thinking about this regionally or as a state, like where does Vermont need housing? It needs in and around the Burlington area.
Right.
And if you have people that live in and around the Burlington area, you don't have to develop, Camel's Hump. You don't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah. Of course.
right? Like you don't have to plow through, some natural area in Bristol
Yeah.
or, up in the Green Mountain National Forest, right? Like preserving some of those like special places in this state can be done.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that like a field 2 miles from the biggest concentration of jobs and amenities
Hmm.
needs to be treated as on the same level of virtuosity
Right.
as some of these like really majestic um, places in our state, right? Like, so if you go to the Sunset Trail over here on Mount Mansfield,
Yep.
it's amazing.
Yeah, it
it's,
is.
It's gorgeous. It's
Yeah.
just absolutely wonderful. Like, we don't need to pave that,
Yeah. Of
right?
course
Like,
not.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that like South Burlington empty field needs to
Right.
be thought of on the same level. Like
Hmm.
South Burlington is where we need the housing,
Right.
right? Shelburne, Williston,
Yeah.
Essex, Colchester,
Yeah.
Burlington, Winooski. That's where we need housing.
That's where the people are.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's going to cut down on commuting and
commuting and and if it's modern new housing with modern new insulation, it's going to cut down on heating costs. That's going to cut down on
right.
fossil fuel emissions, right? Like that's the really strategic way to be an environmentalist at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense, and I think no no highway up Mansfield is a good idea.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
right?
And that's what I mean. Kind of going off topic, but Mount Washington in New Hampshire did that, and I don't know. I hiked, so
I've hiked Washington.
right. You get to the top and you're like, I made it up there, and then you see people who drove up in their cars and took the train. You're like, oh, okay.
Okay.
So, all right, something else that I wanted to touch on is Washington State just eliminated their single-family zoning throughout the entire state. So you can't have any more single-family zoning. I know it sounds like Vermont is kind of working that way as well, and Burlington has, they've at least proposed, I've talked about it on the channel before, they proposed allowing 1 to 4 units on any lot. I don't know if they're moving forward with that or
Yeah.
not, but what do you think about that?
Makes a lot of sense, right? Like there's a lot of areas in Burlington that frankly should not be a single family house.
Right.
It would just be a lot better in all kinds of ways. So we're a triplex, a quadplex, even a sixplex,
Yeah.
right? Because like that would help create a denser, more vibrant, more walkable Burlington,
Yeah.
right? And also it adds to supply.
Hmm.
And so that's going to help bring some of those prices down. Like some of the prices in Burlington are unreal
Yeah.
for like not a big house.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
And so increasing the supply in Burlington could be really helpful. It's not like we're going to have like skyscrapers or anything. Like
Yeah.
I think sometimes people are imagining something that's like not what we're going to get if we just like open up some of the zoning rules.
Yeah.
Like we could have a lot of what are known as 5/1s.
Okay.
Where like the bottom row is like retail. Like you'll have like a
Right.
store or a business or whatever. And then you get 5 floors of housing on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's mixed use. It's dense, it's walkable, it's
Mm.
energetic, it's vibrant.
Yeah.
People want to live there. I mean, my wife and I, we lived in Cambridge for a long time before we moved up here. Um, cool. Like we're
Right.
not opposed to that either.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
I think a lot of those reforms could really be useful. Burlington, Winooski, even parts of South Burlington.
Yeah. Definitely. And I know I forget whose name it is, but the guy who owns Spot on the Dock and Hula,
Hmm.
the Hula building downtown, he bought that parking lot kind of by
Uh-huh.
Hula. I don't know if you've seen he wants to do pretty much exactly what you were talking
That'd be
about
great.
with short,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
storefronts
so
down
so
there.
so if he wants to do that, we shouldn't be putting big regulatory barriers in his way,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes like deregulation and sort of markets. I understand are not always like the most like popular verbiage to use,
Yeah.
but like if somebody wants to build housing in Burlington,
Hmm.
we shouldn't make it harder than it has to be to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. What do you think are any downside risks to that, to maybe deregulation or, you know,
I don't. It sort of depends on what you're trying to like maximize as
accomplish?
your goal,
Mm,
right? Like, I think sometimes there's just this like fear of change that
mm,
can take over, and I think people are afraid that something that they think is special will stop being special.
mm.
And I think what I would try to do is explain to people that that's not going to happen. Like there's like a little more foot traffic.
Right.
Like it'll be fine. I promise.
Yeah.
Like if there's like a fourplex somewhere in the south end of Burlington,
Mm,
it'll be fine.
right.
Like you'll get used to it before you know it, and I promise you it won't bother you after like a minute.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever seen like like roundabouts on the road,
Sure.
right? So whenever like the people who like design traffic are like thinking about replacing like a traffic light with a roundabout,
Yeah.
people get all up in arms. They're like, a roundabout, oh no, like we're not used to that.
Right.
Like a week later everybody's used to it, it's totally fine. It's
Yeah.
like
They're
nobody
caught.
pays it a second thought
Yeah.
that there's a roundabout there now. And it's kind of like that with like denser housing, like fourplexes, sixplexes, quads, even some of these like 5/1s.
Right.
Like I promise you, you'll be used to it in like a month. Like your farmers market's not going away.
Right.
You know, your trail on Mount Mansfield's not going away.
Hmm.
The sugaring house out in Starksboro that you like going to, the apple orchard out there that you like going to in the fall, is not going away.
Yeah.
Some more housing is not gonna like
It's not
make
gonna.
Vermont not Vermont.
Right. It's not gonna take away the, like you said, the apple orchard.
Yeah, yeah,
If they've put up that 5/1s on a parking lot in Burlington.
yeah.
Um. All right. Well, let's see if there's anything else. Just wrapping up here. Um. What do you think? So, kind of getting back to the economics of what's going on in the current economy with
Hmm.
interest rates being high, with uncertainty as far as the banking issues that are causing fear in the
Hmm.
markets. CPI is still high, unemployment is low, and it just seems like in the macroeconomic environment right now, there's some uncertainties. And how do you think that's affecting the Vermont housing market, if at all?
Well, it's making credit tighter, and so credit being tighter means every extra dollar on a purchase price of a house is actually magnified,
Right.
right? So like if you're not talking about 2.5%, 3% mortgage, if you're talking about 5.5, 6%, the difference between 250 and 3 is huge. The
Right.
difference between 350 and 4 is enormous,
Yeah.
right? And so what it actually does is it makes Vermont's expensive housing feel even more expensive.
Yeah.
And so this environment is actually even tougher because
Hmm.
when you're combining Vermont's expensive housing with the high interest rate environment, and it has some really not great generational distributional implications.
Mm.
So like if you're paying all cash for a house because you're retiring from New Jersey up to Vermont, you don't care what the interest rates are, you're paying cash,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a young family trying to buy a house, your mortgage is that's a big loan.
It
And
is.
so the extra interest rate really hits those first time home buyers super hard in a way it doesn't hit older people.
Yeah.
And so what you're getting And I've been looking for data on this, but I've yet to find it. But what you're getting is you're getting more older people move in,
Hmm.
and you're having more younger families sort of chased away.
Right.
Um, and I've seen this. I talk to a lot of other families my age,
Hmm.
you know, leaving or thinking about leaving, and none of them hate Vermont. I've
Yeah.
never talked to a person that's leaving Vermont that's like, I hate it here.
Yeah.
Not once has that happened.
Yeah.
They just can't afford it.
Yeah. I know. It is tough when there's 8 offers on a home and the seller is looking at a cash offer,
Yeah,
or a first time home buyer maybe putting 5% down
yeah,
who can't afford to waive the inspection.
yeah.
It's kind of a no-brainer for the seller.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, look, for a lot of these sellers, they worked hard all their life. They want to like retire now,
Yeah.
and if they can get $50,000 extra dollars on their house and go retire somewhere else, I don't blame them for doing what's best for themselves, so they can have a nice retirement. Like good for them.
Yeah.
Um, but it does put young families in a really tough bind around here.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Um, well, I think that's all the questions that I had for you. Thank
Okay.
you so much for talking
Yeah.
to me on
Thank
this
you.
channel. It's been a pleasure.
Super
Um,
fun.
yeah, and we'll see you guys in the next video.